In Bryant Park, I found my son sitting on a bench with my grandson and 3 suitcases, everything he owned. I asked him, "Why aren't you at the office?" He looked down. I was fired. My father-in-law said our blood doesn't belong with people like them. I smiled, not with joy, but with something colder. Get in the car. And tonight, that man was about to learn who really owned the board he thought he controlled. Welcome to our channel. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more powerful narratives. We're curious. Where are you watching from? Share your location in the comments. Note, this tale combines fictional elements with real-world themes for dramatic effect and learning. Names and settings may be imagined, but the lessons about loyalty, strategy, and family are drawn from genuine human experience. On a Thursday afternoon in October, I found my son sitting on a park bench with everything he owned in 3 suitcases. Bryant Park, 2:30. Nathan hunched on a bench, shoulders curved inward, 3 suitcases beside him, and Mason, my 4-year-old grandson, kicking fallen leaves in light-up sneakers. I pulled over fast. Nathan didn't look up until my shadow fell across him. His eyes were red from exhaustion and something deeper, defeat. "Dad?" Mason ran over and grabbed my hand. "Grandpa, can you fix this?" I looked at my son. "Why aren't you at the office?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "Fired this morning. Charles said our blood doesn't belong with theirs." The words hung in the cold air. 3 years of Sunday dinners. 3 years watching Charles Pennington explain the difference between old money and new, between people who belonged and people who didn't. I'd cataloged every insult. This was a line crossed. "Get in the car." "I don't have anywhere to go. Victoria changed the locks. Put my things outside while I was being fired." His voice cracked. Said her father made the right call. Mason tugged my sleeve. "Mommy says you're the strongest man in New York." I knelt to his level. "I can fix it, buddy. I promise." I picked up 2 suitcases and nodded to Frank, my head of security. "Help Mr. Nathan." We drove north in silence. Nathan sat in back with Mason, who fell asleep immediately. I watched them in the rearview mirror, my son, who'd aged 10 years. In one morning, my grandson, who still believed grandpas could fix anything. Manhattan's skyline gave way to bridges, then autumn trees. "I built Sullivan Maritime over 30 years, I said. "Started with 1 truck. 800 million annual now." Nathan knew this, but I needed to say it. 3 years ago, I bought Hudson Freight for 20 million, through offshore companies where the real owner stays hidden. I paused. "I put Charles in charge as CEO. Nathan's eyes sharpened in the mirror. "You came to me that day, said you wanted respect for who you are, not whose son you are. I agreed not to interfere. Our deal. You kept it. For 3 years I watched you endure things that would have broken most men. Listened to Charles explain why everything about you was insufficient." My hands tightened on the wheel. I said nothing, because we had a deal. Mason stirred. "But Charles doesn't know something," I said, voice dropping. "Hudson Freight doesn't belong to him. Never did. Every paycheck he signed, every insult, all in a company I own. He's been working for me the entire time." Silence. Then, "You've owned it all along." "Yes." "Why put me through that?" "Because you asked me to. You needed to know you could stand alone." I met his eyes in the mirror. "But that deal died when I saw you on that bench." The Bedford gates appeared iron and stone. Home. "What are you going to do?" I smiled. Not warm. The smile before closing deals that left the other side with nothing. Charles wanted to play games with bloodlines. Now he learned something. In my world, bloodlines mean nothing. Only power matters. And he just started conflict with the wrong family. Nathan didn't know I'd been paying Charles's salary all along. Didn't know I could take it all back with 1 call. Didn't know I'd been collecting every slight like a prosecutor, building a case. But he was about to find out. The reckoning had begun. Every Sunday for 3 years, I swallowed insults, along with expensive wine and collected ammunition. While Nathan settled Mason upstairs for the night, I sat in my study and let my mind drift back to those weekly rituals at the Pennington estate. Greenwich. White columns trimmed hedges. A dining room with crystal chandeliers and a table that seated 12 but only ever held 5. Charles at the head. Victoria beside him, scrolling through her phone. Nathan across from his wife, shoulders tense. and me at the far end close enough to witness everything far enough to be dismissed. That first Sunday 3 years ago, Charles picked up Nathan's wine glass and repositioned it 2 inches to the left, like this. His voice carried that tone rich men use when pretending to be helpful. You hold vintage Bordeaux with respect. The stem, Nathan, never the bowl. Details expose breeding or the lack of it. Nathan's face flushed. Yes, sir. Victoria didn't look up from her phone. She never defended him. Not once in 3 years. I cut my duck with precision and said nothing. Every week another correction, his posture, his choice of tie, his state school education versus Charles's Yale degree. Every comment about how some people just didn't understand the nuances of high society. 3 years of watching my son's light dim, but I'd made a promise not to interfere. So I observed, memorized, built my case. Then 6 months ago, something shifted. Hudson Freight's quarterly reports started arriving a week late. In logistics, that's an eternity. When I called accounting, they stuttered excuses about system upgrades. I didn't believe them. 3 months later, Victoria stopped answering my calls. Before, she'd maintained appearances, hoping for expensive gifts. Now, straight to voicemail. We're at an event. We're traveling. We're resting. A wall had grown between us overnight, but the moment I knew something was seriously wrong came 1 week ago. Nathan visited my office at One World Trade Center. He looked terrible, gaunt, dark circles under his eyes suit hanging loose. He'd lost weight. Just busy, Dad. Quarter-end closing. I knew quarter-end closing didn't make a man look crushed. Then I noticed his wrist. The Rolex Daytona I'd given him for his 30th birthday platinum $50,000 was gone. Where's your watch? Nathan pulled his sleeve down quickly. At the jeweler. Clasp was loose. The lie sat between us. I'd bought that watch. The clasp had never been loose. Nathan was careful with possessions, almost obsessively so, which meant one thing: he'd sold it. Or pawned it. A man doesn't pawn a $50,000 watch unless he's desperate. After Nathan left, I called Frank Morrison. Complete audit of Hudson Freight. Every transaction for 6 months. And Frank, find out what's happening at the Pennington house. Quietly. Understood, Mr. Sullivan. 24 hours later, Frank walked into my study with information that would change everything. But that was Thursday morning hours before I'd find Nathan on that park bench. The signs had been there all along. Delayed reports, avoided calls, the missing watch, Charles's increasing confidence like a man who thought he'd gotten away with something. He had no idea I'd been watching, waiting, that every insult, every slight, every smug comment had been building toward something he couldn't imagine. Within 24 hours I would know the truth, and the truth would require its price. That evening, Frank Morrison walked into my study with a black folder. Black meant immediate action required. You need to see this, Mr. Sullivan. I was already seated. He laid the folder on my desk and opened it without ceremony. Page 1. Police report. Filed today at 1:15, just hours after Nathan was terminated. Complainant Charles Pennington. Allegation Nathan Sullivan removed valuable family heirlooms upon departure. Antique coins, sterling silver jewelry. Estimated value $2.8 million. He filed this while Nathan sat on that park bench. I said quietly. Yes, sir. Wanted him arrested before he could defend himself. Page 2 made my jaw tighten. Credit report. 12 separate loans from different banks over 6 months. Total $18 million. All in Nathan's name, except they weren't his signatures. Handwriting expert confirmed. Frank said, sliding another document across. High-quality digital forgeries. They used Nathan's actual signature from company documents plotted onto loan applications. The collateral agreements listed Hudson Freight as guarantor Nathan's personal assets as secondary security. When the loans defaulted, the banks would destroy everything. The company would collapse. Nathan would be personally liable for $18 million he never borrowed. They were building a trap, I said. Bankrupt the company, blame Nathan, let criminal charges follow. He goes to prison while they walk away clean. That's our assessment. Frank pulled out a tablet and pressed play. The video showed Nathan and Victoria's bedroom camera hidden. Victoria's voice was sweet with poison underneath. You're so tense lately, Nathan. Maybe you should see someone. You're becoming aggressive. You're scaring Mason. I'm not aggressive. I'm just tired. See, you're yelling. You're unstable. The video cut. Another clip showed Victoria breaking a vase, then immediately, why did you do that? Mason, go to your room. Daddy's having another episode. She was building a custody case, Frank said. These videos would be shown to a judge. Proof Nathan was dangerous, mentally unstable. She'd get full custody. He'd get supervised visitation at best. I closed my eyes briefly, controlling the cold fury building in my chest. One more thing, Frank said quietly. The worst part. He laid down a document I recognized immediately. Pledge agreement. My international shipping license number 7801, the authorization for Sullivan Maritime to operate in every major eastern seaboard port. Contracts worth $400 million annually. Pledged as collateral for a $7.5 million loan from a Cayman Islands fund. How did they access the original? Forged duplicate through a corrupt notary. The money transfers tomorrow at noon. Through the window, I could see the main house where Nathan was in the next room, with Mason putting him to bed. Completely unaware his entire life had been systematically dismantled. Block that transfer, I said. Federal Reserve Treasury Department, whoever you need. That money doesn't move. Understood. And Frank, get me everything on Charles Pennington. Every loan, every account, every offshore entity, every secret. Frank nodded. He recognized this tone. They tried to build a trap for my son, I said quietly. Now I'm going to show them what a real trap looks like. After Frank left, I sat alone. In the next room, Nathan's voice drifted through, reading Mason a bedtime story. My grandson's sleepy laughter. They'd tried to take that away. From both of them. Charles and Victoria Pennington had made a critical miscalculation. They thought I was just a wealthy old man who'd sit quietly while they destroyed my family. They were about to learn the difference between having money and having power. The defense was over. Now came the reckoning. Predators hunt at night, so do I. But I hunt with balance sheets and wire transfers weapons far deadlier than claws. At 8 o'clock Thursday evening, I stood in the shadows of Christie's Rockefeller Center showroom, surrounded by gilded frames and ancient sculptures worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. Charles Pennington moved through the crowd like a man who owned the room. He didn't. I did, or at least I owned the company that paid his salary. He stopped near a Basquiat sketch, checking his phone twice. Nervous. A man approached. Mid-40s leather jacket, over designer jeans, gold Rolex catching the light. This had to be Tony Russo, a name Frank had flagged months ago in connection with container theft and off-the-books shipping deals along the eastern seaboard. Frank's voice crackled softly in my earpiece. Target confirmed. Anthony Russo. 2 priors for cargo theft, 1 sealed, currently under federal watch. Charles extended his hand. Russo didn't shake it. Instead, he slid a small USB drive across the marble pedestal between them. 10 units, Russo said quietly. Mercedes Actros 2023 models. Clean titles, offshore registration. $85,000 each. I felt my jaw tighten. $85,000 per truck, 30% of market value. 10 trucks meant $850,000, moving under the table using Hudson Freight's licenses and infrastructure. Charles pocketed the USB without looking at it. Tomorrow morning. Port of Newark, Pier 47, cash on delivery. Half up front, Russo countered. Or the deal's off. Charles hesitated, then nodded. Fine, I'll wire it tonight. From my position 15 feet away, I raised my phone and captured 3 clear photos. The handoff, Russo's face, Charles's hand on the USB. Frank, positioned near the champagne bar, had recorded the entire conversation. Captain Brooks is standing by, Frank murmured through the earpiece. He can intercept the shipment at dawn. No, I said softly, turning toward the exit. Let it play out. I want them both on record taking delivery. Then we move. Friday afternoon, I sat alone at a corner table in the Modern at MoMA, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the sculpture garden. Victoria arrived at 3 o'clock sharp, wearing a gray cashmere cardigan and oversized sunglasses she didn't remove indoors. She slid into the chair across from me and let out a long, theatrical sigh. This has been so difficult for me. She began dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. Nathan's behavior, I never imagined he'd become so unstable. I said nothing, just watched. I want this resolved quietly, she continued, for Mason's sake. What do you want, Victoria? She leaned forward. The Tribeca penthouse, $4.5 million. Sign it over to me and I'll withdraw the charges. Nathan can go free. I let the silence stretch, watching her mask slip just slightly, the hunger beneath the grief. That's... That's my home, I said, injecting just enough fear into my voice. It's all I have left. Then you'll lose your son, too, she said coldly, placing a document on the table. This is a donation agreement, not a settlement. No lawyers, no records. Just a generous gift from a father-in-law who cares. Extortion dressed up in legalese. I reached for the paper, slowly running my finger along the edge. The microphone pinned inside my collar was recording every word. I'll need time. You have until 10 a.m. tomorrow, Victoria interrupted, standing abruptly. The notary is waiting. Don't be late. She walked away, heels clicking against marble shoulders back like she'd already won. Frank's voice returned to my earpiece as the restaurant door closed behind her. Got every word. Extortion, coercion, and conspiracy. I pulled out my phone and called James Thornton at Manhattan Capital. Buy every debt Charles Pennington has. By tomorrow morning, I want to own his life. While Victoria waited at a notary I'd never contacted, I had other plans for Saturday. There's a moment in every war when you stop defending and start conquering. Mine came at 10 a.m. Saturday morning. James Thornton sat across from me on the 47th floor of Manhattan Capital Bank, a stack of contracts between us that would destroy Charles Pennington's life. Purchasing distressed debt in this volume is highly unusual, James said, adjusting his glasses. The risk exposure is mine, I interrupted. This isn't an investment, it's a tool. He slid the first contract forward. The Greenwich Estate mortgage, $3.2 million outstanding. I signed without reading. Vehicle loans, Bentley Continental and Range Rover autobiography, $480,000 combined. Another signature. Mrs. Pennington's credit cards, 7 accounts, nearly $200,000 total. I paused briefly, picturing Victoria's face when her black card declined. Then I signed. Hudson Freight, business lines? James continued, his voice dropping. $12 million in overdraft facilities. If Hudson defaults, you can seize everything the company, their home, their assets. Perfect. I signed 3 times. James stacked the documents. Mr. Sullivan, what exactly are you planning? Justice. By the time we finished, $35 million in debt had transferred to Sullivan Maritime Holdings. It gave me something far more valuable than money. Control. At noon, I called from my car. James, freeze all accounts tied to Charles Pennington, effective immediately. Sir, that will... I'm the primary creditor. Do it. 15 minutes later, confirmation arrived. Account status blocked reason. Internal security review. Contact creditor. I imagined Charles seeing that message, feeling the ground shift beneath his feet. At 2 p.m., Frank called. The Cayman transfer is flagged, he reported. $7.5 million. Federal Reserve has it marked for money laundering investigation, frozen pending review. How long? Months, maybe years. The international shipping license Charles had illegally pledged would remain exactly where it belonged. With me. And the plaza. Tech team in position, video evidence loaded. Waiting for your signal. Nathan's safe at Bedford with Mason. Asking questions, but he doesn't know the timeline. Keep it that way. By 5 p.m., I stood in a private suite at the plaza, looking down at Fifth Avenue as twilight settled over Manhattan. Frank reviewed final details beside me. We're ready, Mr. Sullivan. I straightened my tie and checked my watch. Somewhere across town, Charles Pennington was putting on his tuxedo, rehearsing his acceptance speech, basking in the glow of an award he thought would cement his legacy. He had no idea I'd already taken his crown. Charles is preparing for his coronation, I said. He doesn't realize the throne is already empty. Frank nodded. The ballroom opens at 7. 300 guests confirmed. Everyone will be watching. I turned from the window. Good. Let them watch. By 7 o'clock, I would walk into that ballroom, and Charles Pennington's world would end, not with a whisper, with a reckoning. The Plaza Ballroom glittered like a jewelry box, the perfect place to shatter illusions. From my private box behind velvet curtains, I watched 300 of Manhattan's elite settle into their seats. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light across silk gowns and tailored tuxedos. Everything gleamed with old money and false respectability. Charles Pennington stood near the center in a midnight blue Tom Ford tuxedo, accepting shallow congratulations. Victoria positioned herself beside him in crimson, her smile frozen in place. But something was wrong. Guests whispered after greeting Charles. Leaning close, eyebrows raised, phones discreetly checked. News traveled fast in circles this small. At 7:55, Charles's phone buzzed. I watched him pull it from his pocket and go completely still, his face drained of color. He tapped the screen once, twice, 3 times, each attempt more frantic. Account suspended, reason, anti-money laundering review. Action required contact, new creditor. He tried logging into another account, then another. Error, error, error. Victoria leaned toward him, still smiling for the crowd. What's wrong? Charles showed her his phone. Her smile vanished. My cards, she whispered, pulling out her own phone. They're all declined. The caterer payment bounced. Charles scanned the room, searching for allies. Eyes that had welcomed him for decades suddenly found urgent reasons to look elsewhere. One by one, his network dissolved. He straightened his bow tie, forced his shoulders back, adopted the expression of a man in control. But his hands trembled. At exactly 8 o'clock, the lights dimmed. The master of ceremonies took the stage with a practiced smile. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to present this year's Entrepreneur of the Year award to Mr. Charles Pennington. Applause rippled through the ballroom, polite, scattered, notably brief. Charles walked toward the stage, each step heavier than the last. The spotlight followed him, harsh and unforgiving. Sweat gleamed on his forehead. He grasped the microphone, opened his mouth to speak, and the giant LED screen behind him blazed to life. Instead of the Hudson Freight logo, audio crackled through the speakers. Victoria's voice crystal clear. The old fool fell for it. The penthouse is ours. Charles spun toward the screen, his face contorting in horror. His own voice, recorded 3 days earlier. What about Nathan? Victoria's cold laugh. Let him rot in prison. He needs to learn his place. The ballroom erupted in gasps. 300 people leaned forward, phones rising to capture what came next. The screen shifted. Documents appeared, bank records, forged on signatures, offshore transfers. Each stamped with bold red letters, forgery, extortion, fraud. Charles stood frozen at the podium, mouth opening and closing soundlessly, his carefully constructed empire collapsing in real time. And from my place behind the curtain, I stepped forward into the light. There's a particular silence when 300 people realize they've witnessed a performance of lies. That silence is justice. The LED screen continued its revelations. Text messages between my son's father-in-law and his daughter, forged bank reports, wire transfer orders to offshore accounts, each document stamped in blood-red letters. Forgery, extortion, fraud. He gripped the podium, knuckles white. This is lies, fabricated security, remove this. The security guards didn't move. They worked for the plaza. And the plaza's contract had been purchased by Sullivan Maritime 3 hours ago. A spotlight swung toward my private box. I stepped forward and descended the stairs. 300 faces turned. My footsteps echoed in the silence. Good evening. I walked onto the stage and stood beside him. Up close, I could see the panic in his eyes, the sweat soaking through his collar. He turned to the audience desperately. I am a man of standing. This commoner envies the class we represent. No one spoke. No one moved to his defense. I addressed the room calmly. This commoner built the houses you sleep in, shipped the goods that made your fortunes, and yes, paid for that tuxedo he's wearing. I placed 3 folders on the podium. Folder 1. Liquidation notice. Hudson Freight belongs to me. It always has. I purchased it through an offshore holding 3 years ago. He's been my employee, drawing the salary I provided while he tormented my son. His mouth opened, but no sound came. Folder 2. Lease termination. The land beneath his estate. Also mine. Stealing from your landlord is remarkably unwise. His legs buckled slightly. Folder 3. The district attorney now has copies of every forged signature, every fraudulent loan, every illegal wire transfer. You wanted to put my son in prison on false charges. I leaned closer. Welcome to your own cage. He collapsed, not dramatically, just a slow, defeated sink to his knees, then onto the stage floor. His midnight blue tuxedo crumpled beneath him. His daughter screamed. She launched herself from the front row, hands extended like claws. Frank Morrison intercepted her midway up the stairs, catching her wrists. Let me go, Daddy. Do something. Her father didn't move, didn't even look up. Frank produced an envelope. Eviction notice. Police are at the estate now. You have 2 hours to collect personal items. All jewelry and valuables have been sealed as evidence." Her screams dissolved into sobbing. I turned to address the ballroom one final time. "Check your pockets when you're around people like this. You never know what might go missing." My son waited at the entrance. "Mason's with the nanny at Bedford," he said softly. We walked out together while behind us security guards lifted the broken man from the floor, and his daughter swung her designer purse uselessly at Frank's shoulder. Outside October, air hit my face. NYPD detectives were waiting in the lobby, federal warrants in hand. They arrested him immediately, 5 charges. His daughter faced different consequences: civil conspiracy, extortion. No handcuffs for her that night, but consequences nonetheless. I didn't feel triumph. I felt exhausted relief. The predators were caged. Now came the healing. If you've stayed with me through this journey, through the humiliation, the strategy, and tonight's reckoning, leave a comment below. Tell me, would you have done the same to protect your family? I need to know I'm not alone in this. And a word of caution: what comes next, the aftermath. The consequences they faced, some details have been dramatized for this telling. Not everything unfolded exactly as I've described. If you prefer to remember tonight's justice as the ending, you're free to stop here. But if you want to know what happened to Charles, to Victoria, and how my son rebuilt his life, stay with me just a little longer. 2 weeks can feel like 2 years when your world collapses. Every minute for them was eternity. He was processed that night. Federal agents took him directly from the plaza to detention. 5 charges: forgery, embezzlement, fraud, identity, theft, criminal conspiracy. Each count carried years. Now he sat in a 6-by-8 cell awaiting trial, staring at concrete walls. His lawyers abandoned him the moment his accounts froze. No money meant no defense. The man who'd once commanded boardrooms and country clubs now commanded nothing but a metal toilet and a narrow window. The orange jumpsuit hung loose on his frame. He'd lost 15 pounds in 2 weeks. The Tom Ford tuxedo was gone, seized as evidence. He spent hours staring through reinforced glass at a slice of gray sky, replaying the plaza ballroom, the screen, the gasps, the collapse of everything he'd built on lies. The name that once opened doors was now whispered like a disease. She wasn't arrested that night. Her crimes were primarily civil conspiracy, extortion attempts. Serious? Yes, but not the federal charges her father faced. The district attorney offered a deal: cooperate against him, forfeit all assets except 5 years probation. She took it. She had no choice. Now she lived in a 400-square-foot studio in Queens, the first place she'd ever rented herself. At 32, she was learning to do laundry for the first time, to cook her own meals, to count change at a bodega, while strangers sighed impatiently behind her. Her last Hermes bag was listed on eBay: authentic, excellent condition, must sell. The rent was due in 5 days. She'd called her father twice from a borrowed phone. Both calls went to voicemail. He couldn't help her from a cell. He couldn't even help himself. Karma arrived in its purest form. My son returned to Hudson Freight as CEO, the position that should have been his all along. $120 million in contracts, 43 employees, 5 major ports. His first week back, he fired the purchasing manager who'd taken bribes. No hesitation. "Pack your desk. Security will escort you out." The soft man who'd apologized for existing was gone. In his place stood someone forged in fire, tempered by betrayal, hardened into steel. He balanced CEO duties with being a full-time father to Mason, morning preschool drop-offs, evening bedtime stories, weekend soccer in Riverside Park. I watched him meet with suppliers, firm but fair, demanding excellence without cruelty. Employees who'd once mocked him now avoided his eyes. "Is there a problem?" he asked one directly. "No, sir," the man stammered. I stood in the observation room, watching my son command respect he'd earned through survival. Frank appeared beside me. "He's ready, sir. More than ready." "I know." I turned from the window. "There's one more place I need to go. Back to where it all began. The park bench in Manhattan, where everything had changed. I needed to sit there again, not as a warrior, but as a grandfather. The same bench, the same autumn leaves. But the man sitting there was different. Lighter, freer, at peace. No suitcases this time. No desperation. Just Mason chasing pigeons across the plaza with his arms stretched wide like wings, his laughter ringing out clear as bells. I poured coffee from a stainless steel thermos, Simple, practical nothing like the silver service I'd once thought mattered. A woman pushing a stroller passed by. Our eyes met. We exchanged genuine smiles, the kind strangers share when the world feels briefly kind. I realized something. Then I'd finally escaped the iron mask I'd worn for 30 years. The mask of the empire builder, the strategist, the man who turned shipping routes into fortunes and never let anyone see him bleed. It was gone now, and I could breathe. I hadn't just saved my son. I'd given him something more valuable than Sullivan Maritime, more lasting than any balance sheet. A legacy of dignity. The kind that must be protected every single day in every decision, in how you treat people when no one's watching. Charles Pennington had believed lineage mattered most. Breeding, bloodlines, the right last name on the right documents. He was wrong. Character matters, loyalty, love. The things you can't inherit, only earn. 30 years I'd spent building Sullivan Maritime into an $800 million operation. 43 vessels, 5 major ports, contracts spanning 3 continents. It took only 2 weeks to build something more valuable. A complete family. A memory surfaced, unbidden Nathan at 7 years old, standing in the doorway of my study in his Little League uniform. "Dad, will you come to my game I'm pitching?" I glanced up from a contract negotiation, barely registering his face. "Not today, son. Maybe next time." There had been so many next times, and I'd missed everyone. I couldn't get those years back, but I could fix the mistake going forward 1 generation at a time. "Grandpa?" Mason came running, his face flushed and happy, clutching a rubber ball he'd found near the fountain. "Watch this." He wound up like a major league pitcher and threw. The ball sailed toward me in a wobbly arc. I caught it, cleanly feeling the satisfying smack against my palm. "Good throw, champ," I said, standing. "Want to practice more?" "Yes." His eyes lit up. "Dad said you'd teach me baseball." I smiled. Really smiled, not the calculated expression I'd used in boardrooms. "Then let's practice." We spent the next 20 minutes throwing the ball back and forth. I showed him how to grip the seams, how to follow through, how to aim for the center of my chest. He missed more than he caught, but he laughed every time, and that mattered more than accuracy. Fixing mistakes, I thought, 1 generation at a time. The sunset painted Bryant Park in shades of orange and red. Office workers streamed past on their way to the subway. The city hummed with its usual evening energy. "Come on, Mason," I said, holding out my hand. "Let's go home. Your dad's waiting." His small fingers wrapped around mine, warm and trusting. We walked together across the plaza, past the fountain where tourists took photos, past the chess tables where old men plotted endgames. At the edge of the park, I looked back one last time at the bench where everything had changed, where my son had sat with 3 suitcases and a 4-year-old boy believing he'd lost everything, where I'd decided that some things family, dignity, love were worth going to war for, where it all began, where it all ended, and where finally healing could start. Looking back now, sitting on this same bench where it all began, I realized something important I need to share with you. Don't be like me. Don't wait 30 years to build an empire before you build a family. Don't let pride make you send your son into a den of wolves just to prove he can stand alone. I thought I was teaching Nathan strength. Instead, I almost lost him entirely. Grandpa stories like mine, the ones about revenge and corporate warfare, they make for compelling tales. But you know what? The best grandpa stories aren't about boardroom battles. They're about teaching a 4-year-old how to throw a baseball, about being there for bedtime, about answering when a small voice asks, "Grandpa, can you fix this?" Real grandpa stories are written in presence, not in power. God gave me 3 chances I didn't deserve. First, he preserved my son when I failed to protect him. Second, he gave me the resources to fight back when others had none. Third, he granted me, Mason, a living reminder that legacy isn't measured in revenue but in relationships. The Bible says, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul?" I gained Sullivan Maritime, $800 million in annual revenue, but I nearly lost what mattered most. Family stories shouldn't be about courtroom victories and financial takedowns. The family stories worth passing down are about showing up, choosing your child's baseball game over another contract negotiation, holding your grandson's hand instead of another meeting. These are the family stories that actually matter, the ones that echo through generations, not because of their drama, but because of their truth. If you're facing betrayal like I did, whether from in-laws, business partners, or people you trusted, remember this: justice matters, dignity matters, But don't let the fight consume you so completely that you forget what you're fighting for. God didn't put us on this earth to destroy our enemies. He put us here to love our families, to stand for what's right, and to pass down something better than wealth to the next generation. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's living well, loving deeply, and finally, coming home. Mason's waiting for me now. We have baseball to practice. Thank you for listening to an old man's story. Final note. This content contains dramatized storytelling elements for educational purposes. Some details are fictionalized, but the core lessons about recognizing financial and emotional abuse are real. If this style doesn't resonate with you, that's okay. Please seek content that better suits your needs.